Hi guys, welcome to Food for Strength. I'm Richard Wolf. This video is an excerpt from a recent Facebook Live event that we published entitled Food for Strength. We talk about what you need to know and do to build a strong, healthy body. Enjoy the video. Tonight, we're going to take a deep dive on what you should be eating, what foods you should be consuming to get stronger and healthier. But before we do that, we should ask ourselves the question, why be concerned about strength in a modern world that has basically engineered the need for strength out of our lives? We have energy conserving devices at every level of our life, and so we really don't need to be strong the way we needed to be strong decades ago to do physical things. But there's other reasons why you want to be strong. So I want to go back to the early 90s and the book Biomarkers by Dr. William Evans. At that time, Dr. Evans was a professor of exercise science at Tufts University. He now teaches at Duke Medical School. But Dr. Evans wrote an important book in the early 90s, which was one of the first books to bring much more attention to this issue of strength. And what Dr. Evans argued in his book, he listed 10 determinants, 10 biomarkers of morbidity and mortality. In other words, 10 things that we can look at that predict whether we'll contract degenerative diseases and whether we'll live a long, vital, healthy life. And so he put strength at the very top of his list. And so other authors have written about this over the past 20 years, but this was really the sort of pivotal turn in America where we became aware of and recognized the need for strength from a health standpoint. We hadn't done that in previous generations. We essentially ignored it for obvious reasons, but it was in the early 90s when his book Biomarkers came out, and many others since then, to put strength front and center as an important marker for quality of living. So what we're really saying here tonight when we talk about strength is food for living well. It's really what we're talking about, but we're going to drill down specifically on strength as a specific health biomarker. Now, the four things we're going to tackle, number one, we're going to answer the question, why should you think protein when you're thinking about eating for strength? Why that's important. So we'll drill down on that to begin. Then we'll talk about knowing your numbers. There are some specific numbers that you want to be in touch with if you're going to consume adequate nutrition to get stronger and healthier. And it's not super complicated, but we'll drill down on those numbers that you should be familiar with. Then we'll talk about quality. Why does the quality of protein matter? And how do you know if you're consuming adequate, high quality protein to get the best strength gains overall? And lastly, we'll wrap up with what do we recommend from a post-workout standpoint. If you're strength training and you're trying to get stronger, what does a post-workout nutrition look like, and how can we keep that simple and doable at the same time? So let's back up for just a second. Thinking protein. If we think about your muscles, the first thing that we need to know from a strength standpoint is that your strength workout is the stimulus that activates the strength building process. And so what we're doing here tonight is addressing people who are strength training, not people that are sedentary, but people who are actively engaged in a strength training program. But the workout is the stimulus that initiates the muscle building process. Good nutrition is what really maximizes the outcomes. When we put those two together, we get a stronger, healthier body. Now, why should we be concerned about protein when there's dozens of other nutrients that we're consuming? When we look at skeletal muscle, we know that it's made out of two things. It's protein and water. And so we're going to look at what we need for protein tonight, but clearly water is important. Your muscles are over 70% water, so you need to be consuming adequate non-caloric liquids. We're not going to talk much about that tonight. That's of course important, but we're going to really drill down on the macronutrient protein since it is the most prevalent compound in your body, including skeletal muscle, second to water. So we know it's made out of protein and water, and so we're going to prioritize our focus on protein here. Now, how much protein is the first question? So knowing your numbers is what this comes down to. If we look at the recommended dietary allowance for daily protein. The first thing we want to say about this is that recommendation established by the National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine is not designed for people that are strength training trying to build muscle and get stronger. It's really designed and based off of sedentary adults who are just living their lives and asking the question, how much protein do I need to at least live well and be reasonably healthy? So that's a separate issue. We're talking about, again, adults who are strength training, how much they need to build muscle and get stronger and healthier over time. And so when we look at that data, we're referencing a systematic review. The largest systematic review ever published in the history of human nutrition was published just last year in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. 11 world-renowned scientists got together, published the results. It took them about a year and a half to compile this data and came up with these numbers. And what these numbers represent is the point at which protein's muscle building effect leveled out. And so if I give you protein, we increase muscle protein synthesis. We increase the formation of new skeletal muscle when you eat protein. And that effect, that process continues to climb up to a certain threshold. So we're going to talk about that threshold. What is it? That number, or those numbers, are if you take your body weight divided by 2.2 to determine how many kilos you weigh. So your body weight divided by 2.2 will get your body weight in kilos, and we multiply that by 1.6. So let me use myself as an example. I'm about 190 pounds. Divided by 2.2, I'm 83 kilos. If I multiply that by 1.6, I get about 135 grams of protein a day. So based on this large systematic review published just last year, we're recommending that 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight is sort of the top where the benefits of strength training level out. If we go above that level, we see increased protein oxidation. It's a simple term for proteins being burned off. It's not being integrated into muscle tissue. Now this is basically double the RDA. So it's a fairly meaningful jump in terms of how much more protein we want you to consume. But this is a threshold that this review found in adults who were active, who were strength training, and in fact they were using protein supplements to meet some of their protein requirements, that the benefits leveled out at 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So again, figure out what that number is for you. And the footnote to this conversation is really, if you feel like you're not at a healthy weight or an ideal body weight, if you, in your own wisdom, feel like you'd be healthier at a slightly lower body weight, you can always use that estimated ideal body weight. What we don't want to do is overfeed you protein based on additional body fat. We want to get as close as we can reasonably to what would be a sensible, healthy, more of an ideal body weight for you. Now I'm pretty much at my ideal body weight, so I use my actual body weight. Some of you may just use the weight that you weigh today, whatever that might be. But if you feel like you need to lose 10, 20 pounds, whatever it is, use that ballpark ideal weight, so then divide it by 2.2, multiply by 1.6 to get the protein grams per day. That's a total per day that we're recommending to optimize the building of muscle tissue. So that's number one when we think about knowing your numbers. Now the other part of that conversation is, can I eat this all at once? We get this question quite a bit. And for years, nutrition professionals, we've told people that you need a number, just get it in some way, shape, or form. We haven't focused a lot on protein timing or protein distribution. And the last decade has really revealed that that's an important consideration. And so the per meal number that we're going to recommend for you today, there's two numbers I'm going to share actually. If you're under 60, which I'm in that bucket, if you're under 60 years of age, I would take your weight divided by 2.2 times 0.25 to get the per meal amount. So when I do that at 190 pounds, I'm getting, I believe it's about 22 grams. Yeah, when I do the math on myself, it's about 22 grams of protein per meal to get sufficient muscle building activity out of that meal. If I go above that threshold, above that number, that's where we see, again, protein oxidation increases. And again, remember, in simple terms, what is protein oxidation? Protein's being burned off. It's not being integrated into skeletal muscle. So the protein, to some degree, is being wasted. So this would be the minimum recommendation. Body weight divided by 2.2, get the kilos, times 0.25 for a per meal recommendation for those of you that are under 60 years of age. Again, you can always use your ideal body weight when we use this equation too. If you feel like you're at a heavier weight than you should be at. But I use my actual weight. That ends up being 22 grams per meal for me. Now again, if I have more than that, that's okay. That's not harmful to skeletal muscle. It's not harmful to my health if I go a little bit above that. But that would be the minimum dose for optimizing the protein building effect of that meal. Now, the footnote to that conversation is, what if you are over 60 years old? So of course, in an aging population, we have tens of millions of adults turning 60 every day and many over 60. So what about those folks? As we age, we develop a condition known as anabolic resistance. It simply means that our bodies are less sensitive to protein and less able to use protein the older we get. So this means that to achieve that anabolic effect, that muscle building effect in a meal or at all, we just need more protein. And so instead of 0.25 per meal, I'm going to recommend 0.3, at least 0.3. Some evidence says a little higher. So take your weight, again, divided by 2.2. What do you weigh in kilos? Multiply by 0.3 to get the per meal recommendation for building muscle if you're over 60. And I'll just editorialize that number a little bit. What I see in my practice is that most adults over the age of 60, they tend to have one point or one time of the day where they tend to be protein poor, is what I like to say. They have a meal where they're just not getting much, if any, protein. A lot of women have that in the morning. They're eating reasonably healthy some of the time, and they're really missing out on protein. So you want to look at your own eating habits and look at, are you getting that threshold that we talked about at each meal? So I'm recommending at least 3 meals a day for sure, at least 3 protein feedings, and 1 or 2 snacks, depending upon how much food you're consuming and what your body weight actually is. So we're looking at total protein intake for the day and then drilling down on how much you need for each meal, 3 or more meals and or snacks during the day. This is a new approach to protein recommendations that we weren't particularly sensitive to in previous years. So that's our per meal recommendation. And then the take-home message on that is just this whole issue of looking at being optimal versus being practical. When we look at these numbers, it is very easy to look at that first number I talked about and say, for heaven's sakes, I'm only eating half of that right now. There's no way I can get up to that high number. And so in that case, what you want to look for is what we would describe as easy wins. Look for that protein poor time of the day where you're not getting much protein as a way to bump up protein. Look for a snack period that maybe you're choosing foods that have no protein to snack in. And so there might be some easy wins in your day as a way of moving towards that number. Even if you don't get there, think in practical terms. This does not need to be a all or nothing game. Remember, the strength workout stimulates the muscle and strength building process. It's your nutrition that optimizes it. So you're going to get stronger even if you're not eating a perfect diet. What we're talking about here is moving in the right direction to get better strength gains, to get more muscle gains out of the effort that you're already putting into your strength workout. So don't make it an all or nothing campaign. Move in the right direction. I know I'm not always perfect every day with getting my adequate protein in, but overall, I'm certainly moving in the right direction on a consistent basis, and I'm getting close to those numbers to get the best outcomes possible when it comes to building a stronger, healthier body. So think in practical terms. Don't look in a black or white, all or nothing context. So that basically covers point number 2, which is knowing your numbers and being familiar with what we recommend total for the day, as well as per meal, 3 meals and a snack or 2 throughout the day as well. Now, what do we know, or what do we need to know about the quality of your protein and how that factors into the results you're getting? Well, one thing that we know is that all proteins are not equal. And I'm going to differentiate animal proteins from plant proteins. So we know that animal proteins provide all of the 9 essential amino acids in balanced quantities, where plant proteins may provide those amino acids and not always provide those amino acids, but they're not always in balanced quantities and balanced ratios. So what we can generally say, and anyone that knows nutrition knows this, is that typically we refer to animal protein as high quality and plant protein as low quality protein. However, some plant proteins are high quality. Good example is soybeans. That's considered a high quality plant protein. Another example is quinoa. That's considered a high quality protein, the grain quinoa. So it is possible to consume high quality proteins from a plant-based diet, but in general, if you're not a vegan, what we're suggesting is that prioritizing the intake of high quality proteins as a way of meeting that per meal and per day recommendation that we just talked about under knowing your numbers. Now, how much is most? If I'm saying get most of your protein as a high quality animal protein, how much am I talking about here? Well, there are no formal recommendations. There's no concrete guidelines here, but most nutrition professionals will suggest, again, for non-vegans, that you try to get about 2/3 of your protein as high quality as a way, again, of optimizing the muscle building effect of the foods that you're eating. Now, why is this? There's two basic reasons. One is because of the presence of those essential amino acids that we have to get out of our food. The other is about the presence of a specific essential amino acid called leucine. And leucine is what we describe as a branched chain amino acid. Leucine has been implicated in what's known as the leucine trigger hypothesis. And so the leucine trigger hypothesis is a theory about why leucine is so effective at building muscle. One of the things that we see consistently in studies is that when we increase leucine intake, this one amino acid, we really ratchet up muscle protein synthesis. So high quality proteins contain adequate amounts of leucine. Very often, plant-based proteins are lower in leucine. One exception there would be the grain quinoa. So if you're eating a mixed diet and you're not a vegan and you're eating whole proteins, you should be able to get sufficient leucine if you're eating the amounts that we recommended per meal and overall. You don't have to worry and split hairs about leucine. But if you're a vegan and you're limiting yourself to plant-based proteins, and depending upon what options you're choosing, you might consider using a protein supplement as a way of helping you to get up to adequate protein intake. Now, how much leucine do you need? We're going to recommend about 2.5 grams of leucine per meal. So if you have a protein supplement, you can look on the label and it should list the grams, sometimes expressed in milligrams, of the amino acids in that supplement. Now, not all products will list this on the label. You might need to make a call to the manufacturer and ask for that information, but some will provide it. A brand that I often recommend is Sun Warrior, and you'll find that their nutrition products and bars and protein powders, etc., will list the exact amino acid profile to be able to see, am I getting enough leucine if you're using a plant-based protein because you're a vegan, or maybe you just want a plant-based protein as a protein supplement. So be sensitive to that, be aware of it, look for it. If you don't find it, call the manufacturer and they should be able to provide you with that breakdown of information. So here we're simply saying that quality counts. If you can consume animal-based proteins, they're going to provide those 9 essential amino acids in better ratios, a more balanced profile, and they're also going to have adequate leucine, which is, again, implicated in the leucine trigger hypothesis, where we see it building high amounts of muscle tissue when consumed in adequate quantity. So it's an important factor within that essential amino acid issue and complex. So that's really what we want you to know about quality. And I will just take a sidestep here for a second when we think about leucine and we think about protein supplements, one of the popular supplements, as I'm sure you're familiar if you've looked at protein supplements, is supplements that contain the protein whey. Now, whey is a milk-based protein, and the reason why it gets so much attention is simply because it's high in leucine. So it's a very high quality, high biological activity. All the essential amino acids are there, so it's a good protein in general. But again, if you're consuming whole proteins, beef, chicken, turkey, fish, shellfish, cheese, eggs, cottage cheese, yogurt, etc., if you're consuming animal proteins, whole proteins that are intact, you're going to get enough leucine. So you don't have to go out of your way. It seems like today, because there's so much press on this, people feel like they got to go out of their way to try to get some whey protein, not knowing that it's just the presence of the amino acid leucine. So if I consume 30 grams of chicken, I'm getting the leucine that I need. So you don't need to split hairs on this, but if you're buying a supplement and you want to spend the money, supplements that contain whey protein, of course, are high quality because they have those essential amino acids and they provide significant amounts of whey or leucine at the same time. So it's okay to use those supplements, but they're not necessarily a requirement if your food is delivering the total amount from high quality protein sources. So don't get too bogged down with whey proteins if you're eating a good, balanced, adequate protein diet overall. Now, so that's quality. What should we know about post-workout recommendations here? Well, we know that strength training increases protein sensitivity. So what this simply means is that when you do a productive strength workout and you stimulate your muscles, the sensitivity to amino acids, protein building blocks, goes up. It means that your body is better able to utilize those proteins and integrate them to drive muscle protein synthesis. Now, this elevation, we initially thought this elevated sensitivity lasted for a couple hours after the workout. It is elevated for several hours, but we now have evidence telling us that it lasts for up to a day or more after the workout. And so what the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is suggesting, take advantage of that increased sensitivity by consuming some post-workout protein. When we look at the studies that have looked at the effect here, they've used between 10 to 30 grams of protein. And so depending upon what you're eating, what we recommend is kind of a practical approach here, is at least 10 grams of high quality protein within 1 to 4 hours following your strength workout. Now, that could just be a time where it's time for you to eat again. So you're looking at a meal, which is fine. And then in that case, you go back to those numbers we recommended of 0.25 or 0.3 grams per kilogram. So depending upon the timing, you may just have a meal and get your protein that way within several hours after strength workout. So you don't have to consume protein immediately following that workout. That sensitivity does last. It doesn't mean you can't. We have clients who will have protein right after the workout, which is fine. It doesn't hurt you. But you can wait a little while if you want to and get some protein in a little bit later because that sensitivity stays elevated for quite a few hours following the strength workout. But we like to suggest post-workout protein, not only because it contributes to the total for the day. We know this is easier said than done. We're trying to get to those higher numbers, so it contributes total protein to the day. What it also does is something that really doesn't get talked about much, is it displaces other lower quality foods out of your diet. This is a big issue in people that strength train. Most people strength train, yes, they want the health benefits, they want to feel better, but they're trying to improve their body composition. So one of the keys there, besides protein, is making sure that I'm not eating a lot of junk during the day. One of the best ways to do that is to take what we describe as a to-do approach to your nutrition. By telling you what to do and getting some good, nutritious, high-quality, satisfying protein after the workout, we get you full. You're just less likely to go down Main Street USA and eat some of the low-calorie foods or low-quality foods that are just so common in our culture. So I like to do this after my workout. I'll sometimes do a protein shake, and it's very satisfying. It's very filling. I feel good physically, and mentally I know I'm on the right track, so it's very reinforcing. So the post-workout snack can be a tool to not only give you protein, but can also displace other low quality foods that are so prevalent and it keep you full to avoid some of the quote unquote junk food that's just everywhere in our culture. So that's another good reason why post-workout nutrition makes sense and can help you improve body composition by avoiding unnecessary calories and unnecessary foods overall. So what have we said here? Think protein because your muscles are made out of protein. They're basically protein and water. Protein is the second most prevalent compound in your entire body, so we need it if we're building muscles. You want to know your numbers, total grams per day. Take your weight divided by 2.2 times 1.6. That's the total, that's the ideal. Think in practical terms, move towards that number. If you're not perfect, you can still benefit by eating greater quantities to get close to that number. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing campaign. Know your numbers per meal. This is a big one. This is a new one for a lot of people. Take your weight divided by 2.2 times 0.25. If you're under 60, times 0.3 if you're over 60. We need a little more protein if we're older because of that issue of anabolic resistance. And then quality counts, animal protein sources if you're not a vegan. If you are a vegan, look for those foods that have more leucine. Quinoa is a good example. Protein supplements, look for at least 2.5 grams of protein per serving. If it's not on the label, call your manufacturer. One brand that I like to recommend is Sun Warrior. You can find Sun Warrior online. And then post-workout protein makes sense both from an increased protein sensitivity standpoint. Doesn't need to be right away, but reasonably at some point after the workout. But it also helps you to displace other low-quality foods so that you're not getting in a truckload of unnecessary calories. And this is helping you to stay lean and healthy at the same time. Now, that's a lot of information. Where would I suggest you go for additional backup information and references and other tools? I'm going to send you to our Learning Center. Our Learning Center is on our website, and it's a special part of our website that we've created to help people have valuable information specific to strength training in terms of nutrition and training strategies and tips and programs, really to help you move in the right direction. So if you go to medfitnessprogram.com and you scroll to the bottom of the homepage, you'll see the tab for our Learning Center there. We've got videos, we've got our vlog there, we have articles, we have short articles, and soon we'll have our podcast posted at our Learning Center, but all sorts of tools. The two I'm going to suggest is the article, Food for Strength. You can get this topic in writing if you go to our website and click on the Learning Center. You'll see the Food for Strength article there. You'll also see our protein guide, a handy, quick reference for how much protein certain foods give you, so you have a better idea of how to make decisions about getting adequate protein in your diet. We also have the Protein Fix there. That's a more expansive lecture that we've given on this topic that includes even a few more details about protein as well. So lots of good, easy to use resources, videos, articles, etc. to help you stay informed and make good decisions when it comes to living the strength train lifestyle. That's our Learning Center at medfitnessprogram.com. On that note, I am going to thank you for watching this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.